There's no reason to fight.
You ain't got one? Well, I do!
Hwoarang made his first appearance in Tekken 3. Prior to the installment, he was both Baek's taekwondo student and a leader of a street-fighting fraud team that would sneakily make bettors raise their wager by appearing weak at first. Once enough money was raised, Hwoarang would step in and obliterate the competition. One day, the Mishima Zaibatsu associates visited the town, among them being Jin Kazama. And while Hwoarang managed to talk them into a battle, he was unable to defeat Jin and the match ended in a draw, marking Hwoarang's first ever failure. Shortly after the occurrence, Baek Do-san went missing and was believed to be yet another victim of Ogre. Hwoarang enters the third King of Iron Fist tournament in order to avenge his mentor's supposed death, and on top of that, settle score with Jin Kazama. It is unknown whether the two actually clashed in the tournament. By Tekken 4, Hwoarang made his way back to Korea, was drafted in the military, and was assigned to the Special Operations Unit. While he succeeded in many missions, he was quite a hassle to senior officers, as he would often disobey the rules. It seems that he missed the rush of hand-to-hand combat. Once the fourth King of Iron Fist tournament is announced, he vows to defeat anyone that gets in his way of claiming the Mishima Zaibatsu, with his main interest being Jin Kazama. Although, before he could have a chance to fight his nemesis, he was arrested by the military due to deserting his duty. In the custody, Hwoarang received a letter from none other than his mentor. It seems that he did in fact survive Ogre's vicious attack.
Desertion is an offense punishable by court-martial. Give yourself up, soldier!
In Tekken 5, Hwoarang was given an official pardon by the Korean embassy, and after serving 2 more months in the military, he entered the 5th tournament with his main focus once again being Jin Kazama. Hwoarang indeed managed to defeat Jin, but moments after the victory, Jin took his devil form and viciously attacked Hwoarang. So much so that he ended up almost killing him. After waking up in the hospital, the former street fighter begged his mentor to train him like never before. By Tekken 6, Hwoarang was the leader of a group called Resistance, whose main opposition was the Mishima Zaibatsu. At one point, Lars and Elisa encountered Hwoarang, where Elisa claimed that his personal feelings towards Jin Kazama was sabotaging the Resistance's fight against the Mishima Zaibatsu. In Tekken 7, after learning of Jin's disappearance, Hwoarang thought there was more than what meets the eye. Making his way to the Middle East, he did in fact find Jin, albeit in his devil form, and managed to defeat him, transforming him back to his human self. Soon after, the UN soldiers arrived with an intent to detain Jin Kazama and threw a grenade towards the two. Hwoarang moved Jin out of the way, which made him take most of the impact, as a result, severely injuring his right eye. In the brand new Tekken 8, while we aren't entirely sure what his intentions are, we do see him face off against Jin Kazama, and along with that, it seems that his previously injured right eye is well intact and functioning.
정말 따분한 시합이었어.
Jin first appeared in Tekken 3. He was 19 at the time and he's Japanese. Jin is the son of Kazuya and Jun, and he was originally created in place of Kazuya, who wasn't in Tekken 3 because of his death by Volcano in Tekken 2. But we all know Kazuya comes back because he's too popular to die. As of Tekken 3, Jin fights with advanced Mishima-style karate mixed with Kazama-style martial arts. Jin is a calm character. Even though he's in a game where the main focus is to beat people up, he stays calm and collected, and he rarely gets as mad as the other characters. Jin really isn't a shit talker, but he won't hesitate to remind you that you suck in the most monotone way possible. Hwoarang's first tournament was the King of Iron Fist 3. He was 19 years old at the time. His fighting style is Taekwondo. Hwoarang isn't the first character to fight with this style though. It was actually Baek in Tekken 2. Even though he's described as a very skilled fighter, he is still a student with Baek as his teacher. He is an outgoing and hot-headed character who loves street fights and hates losing. His strong personality shows in pretty much everything he does, especially his win poses. Before the start of the third tournament, Hwoarang spent his time at Baek's dojo and was making money through gambling wagers. He was a part of a fraud team where they would pick fights for money, and they would manipulate their opponents by making themselves appear less skilled than they actually were, causing their competition to underestimate them. By doing this, they would easily win every time. One day, members of the Mishima group, including Jin, came to town. Hwoarang talked them into a fight and was matched with Jin. However, when they fought, they could only manage a draw. Hwoarang was embarrassed that he couldn't beat Jin, and this was his first blemish on his fighting career. He vowed to work harder to defeat Jin and become the strongest. There's not too much detail on Hwoarang's place in the third tournament, but by the time of the fourth Iron Fist tournament, Hwoarang was drafted into the military. He was a great soldier who often broke the rules, but after a while he started to feel empty inside, and he missed the old days when he would get into street fights and his rivalry with Jin. When the fourth tournament was announced, he snuck out of the army to participate. Both Jin and Hwoarang were advancing in the tournament, but once it was time for their match, Jin was nowhere to be found. After the tournament, the two met up to fight, but they were interrupted by the Korean army. They were there to capture Hwoarang for leaving without permission. Eventually, Hwoarang was caught and detained, but before he was captured, the two agreed to fight at the next tournament to even the score.
Kazama, remember, I kicked your ass back there. Hey, you listening? I'll give you a chance to even the score at the next tournament. You better show up. Ceasefire!
At the fifth tournament, Hwoarang and Jin met up to fight. At the time, Hwoarang didn't know that Jin was struggling with the devil gene. While fighting, Jin paused and was trying to control the devil gene in him, while Hwoarang thought this was an opportunity to strike. And he did, knocking Jin out. However, with Jin knocked out, the devil gene took over and Devil Jin emerged. They began to fight, but Hwoarang was overpowered and was pretty badly beaten. Before the tournament, Hwoarang was in the hospital recovering from his last fight. He was pretty pissed at how badly he was beaten. So after recovering, he went straight to training, and shortly after, he headed out to try to find Jin for a rematch. Jin was more preoccupied with the war and his uncle Lars. And at the end of Tekken 6, Jin defeats Azazel, and he went missing shortly after. This made Jin even harder to find, and the two never fought or even saw each other during the 6th tournament. Jin was missing around the time of the 7th tournament. He was somewhere in the Middle East, but that's the extent of what everyone knew. At this time, a lot of people were looking for Jin, including Hwoarang. Eventually, he finds Jin and they begin to fight. The story goes two ways. Either Devil Jin wins and Hwoarang deflects a bomb at the last minute to save Jin, or Hwoarang wins and he deflects a bomb at the last second to save Jin. Either way, Hwoarang loses or injures his eye after the fight. We don't know which is canon, but we will know when the 8th game is released. Even though these two are rivals, you can tell that Jin and Hwoarang do not hate each other, like most of the other rivalries in Tekken. Hwoarang might give the impression that he dislikes Jin, but in reality, I think he enjoys their battles, because it gives him something to work harder for. And Jin might give the impression that he doesn't care or he has better things to do, but he never turns down Hwoarang when it's time to fight. Jin isn't the type to waste time on useless things, so if he wasn't interested in fighting Hwoarang, he wouldn't. Also, from what we see, Jin doesn't really have friends or a normal life, and in a way, Hwoarang is that friend for him. They both never hesitate to help each other out when they need to, like in Tekken 4 when Jin helped Hwoarang fight off the Korean army, or much recently when Hwoarang deflected a bomb in order to save Jin. These two remind me of competitive siblings, where you have no problem insulting or fighting each other, but are quick to defend each other from others. Overall, I like the rivalry between these two. I always knew they were rivals, but after researching and learning the story, I actually like the rivalry more. Fighting games are known for being over the top with character designs and storylines, and that's great because it keeps the games entertaining. But it is still nice to have a more somewhat realistic rivalry like with these two.
Now Hwoarang makes his first ever appearance in Tekken 3, where he was of Korean descent and a student of Beck. Now Hwoarang at a very young age began fighting on the streets. He along with many of his friends would pick fights for money, and Hwoarang was undefeated for doing this as he had always concealed his abilities. Now one day members of the Mishima group came to town, including Jin Kazama. Hwoarang is surprisingly able to convince Jin into a fight, but unlike all of his other fights, this ends in a draw. Hwoarang hangs his head in embarrassment as he can't believe he actually drawed with someone. Hwoarang then vows to practice every single day to guarantee that this would never happen again. When Hwoarang heads back to Beck's dojo, he finds out that Ogre has killed him. Hwoarang then trains as hard as he possibly can with the determination to defeat Jin Kazama and seek vengeance against the god of fighting Ogre. Although it's left rather unknown how far he participated in the King of the Iron Fist tournament. Now during the events of Tekken 4, Hwoarang was drafted into the South Korean military. Now during his military service, he was very successful in his missions and was highly regarded as the best fighter in the South Korean army. However, he did have a knack for disobeying orders, and this led to many problems for him. Hwoarang was uninterested in the military, as it left an emptiness within him. He missed the days where he'd be fighting on the streets, and still longed for his rematch with Jin Kazama. When the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 4 was announced, he left his military post in order to enter. He was determined to defeat Jin Kazama, Heihachi Mishima, and anyone else who dared to face him in the tournament. Hwoarang proceeded quite far in the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 4 and was expected to fight Jin Kazama. However, he was taken into custody by the South Korean military, causing him to forfeit his place in the tournament. At the South Korean embassy, Hwoarang was approached by the ambassador, who told him that his master Beck is in fact alive. Apparently, after his battle with Ogre, Beck was injured that badly that he was in a comatized state. Now a few months later, Hwoarang would be discharged from the South Korean military. This meant that Hwoarang could pursue and do whatever he wished now, and the only thing he had on his mind was to fight Jin Kazama once more. He would enter the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 5 alongside his master Beck, to prove to himself that he was an amazing fighter, and to make his master proud. However, things turned very sour very quickly. Hwoarang got his rematch with Jin Kazama. However, he did not know that Jin Kazama at the time was struggling to control his Devil Gene. So at some point during their battle, Jin would hunch over to try and control the Devil Gene. Hwoarang did not know this and took the opportunity to strike him in the back of the head, apparently knocking out Jin and deeming himself as the winner. Hwoarang wasn't prepared for what happened next, as the Devil Gene took over Jin's body. Hwoarang would be defeated and beaten into unconsciousness by Devil Jin. When he woke up, he was in a hospital when he saw Beck standing next to him. Beck would inform him about what happened. Hwoarang was angry at himself as he felt that he was cheated out of his win, and immediately wanted to get back to training even in his hospital bed. But when he attempted to leave the bed, he simply collapsed as his body was far too weak and he'd been beaten so badly. In due time, he was able to leave the hospital finally, and began training under Beck personally. Hwoarang began training harder than he ever had before, and he was devoted to defeating this Devil Jin. And with the announcement of the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 6 by Jin Kazama, he would instantly enter.
How far would a person go to pursue a bitter rivalry? To prove, once and for all, without a shadow of a doubt, that they're the best there is? We'll find this out and more as we delve into the story of Hwoarang. Hwoarang is as ill-tempered as they come. Never being one to back down from a fight, nor go back on his word, he often finds himself in trouble with just his mouth alone. Excitement fuels him. You could even argue that it's his sole reason for fighting. If he hates you, you'll know. If he has a bone to pick with you, you'll know. Well, okay, he usually treats people the same way, but that still doesn't change the fact that you'll know. Believe it or not, Hwoarang isn't the type to let his pride get ahead of him, which isn't a common trait of someone of his character type. As you will see from his interactions within the story, Hwoarang is a go-getter who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. There's a reason why he fights. As a matter of fact, it's the same reason why he'll go after anyone who even thinks that they're stronger than him, to satisfy his pride and lust for battle. One day, the sight of a limousine caught the attention of the brawler. It belonged to the Mishima Corporation. In pursuit of a hefty payday, Hwoarang darted out in front of the vehicle and demanded a fight. This was when a young man with spiky hair exited the vehicle and accepted his challenge. The young man was Jin Kazama. Little did Hwoarang know that this would be the turning point in his life. For the first time in his career of conning, he would only manage a draw. Devastated, he returned to the dojo that he trained in under the tutelage of Pek Do-san. Sometime later, Hwoarang found his master beaten and bruised. Pek became the victim of a creature's onslaught, Ogre. Determined to get revenge for his master's defeat, he enters the third King of Iron Fist tournament. The possibility of redemption for his fight with Jin was just an added bonus. Following the ending of the tournament, Hwoarang was awarded a trophy. Not only did he fail in his pursuit of Ogre, but he didn't even get a chance to fight his rival in the tournament. Frustrated, he prepared to throw the trophy into the sea until his attention became averted by the sight of a familiar face. Stemming from an unrelated event, Jin desperately ran from a group of soldiers in heavy pursuit. As a form of distraction, Hwoarang threw his newly awarded trophy and effortlessly defeated the armed soldiers. After allowing his rival to escape, a flame became ignited within his chest. Not a single word was said, but if his smile was anything to go by, there was much more to look forward to in the future. Whereas many were basking in peace following the third King of Iron Fist tournament, others were active in more ways than one. During this time, Hwoarang was drafted into the South Korean military and assigned to a Spec Ops unit. With his skills in Taekwondo and handiness with a variety of weapons, he earned the praise of his superiors. However, Hwoarang would eventually become a thorn in the backsides of his unit. Hwoarang felt empty. He longed for his prior lifestyle of hustling money and engaging in hand-to-hand combat. When word of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4 reached his ears from the military base, his blood began to stir. Without hesitation, Hwoarang committed the crime of deserting his active duty role to compete in the tournament. Flooded with confidence and anticipation, he swore to defeat Jin and anyone else who dared stood in his way. Following the tournament, Hwoarang approached an empty parking lot to meet with a familiar face, that familiar face being Jin Kazama. Claiming that he never had the chance to fight him in the tournament, Hwoarang denied Jin's refusal to fight. Whereas Jin claimed that he didn't have a reason to fight, Hwoarang had but one: to come out on top. After the fuming battle, the two were approached by soldiers of the South Korean military. At the helm of the group was Hwoarang's commander, demanding for him to stand down. Without a moment's hesitation, Jin called out to one of the soldiers prior to knocking him unconscious. As a way of repaying his debt to Hwoarang, he contributed to his escape, but not before having to hear Hwoarang remind him of his defeat in anticipation for a rematch at the next tournament. Despite Hwoarang's best efforts of escape, he was eventually found and detained. At the Korean embassy, a letter was delivered to him by a man claiming to be the ambassador. A look of sheer surprise colored his face. It was an invitation to the upcoming King of Iron Fist tournament. Hwoarang demanded to be released from his quarters. The next day, he took a flight to Korea to complete his training. At last, he was finished with his military service. Passion fueled his eyes as he prepared himself to face his rival in the tournament. Fight after fight, Hwoarang battled viciously to advance to his rival. Along the way, he encountered his Taekwondo instructor and master, Pek. Yet again, Hwoarang went out on his own without his master's permission. Despite his plea to press on so that he could test his mettle against his longtime rival, his master feverishly challenged him, a challenge that resulted in his defeat. At last, he finally met his rival in the moonlit wilderness. Although Jin had other matters to attend to, he nevertheless accepted his challenge. The ongoing struggle to suppress the devil gene within him, coupled with his goal of wanting to put an end to his family's insanity, resulted in his defeat. Instead of being rewarded with the sense of satisfaction that would come with an undisputed victory, Hwoarang watched idly as his rival left to deal with a more urgent matter. Upon returning home, Hwoarang became involved in street violence, just as he was before. He stared danger right in the face as he prepared himself to take on a group of street ruffians. Just before he put himself at risk of getting injured, his master, Peck, intervened and made swift work of the thugs. Heeding by his demands, Peck dragged his student down the street to return to their martial arts sanctuary. However hard his master may try in order to isolate him from the dangers of unauthorized combat, violence always seems to find its way back. During a late-night drive down a near-empty highway, a strange figure occupied the path ahead. Slamming the brakes did little to halt his overwhelming speed as the figure effortlessly blew Hwoarang backwards and destroyed his bike in the process. Emerging from the flames was a demonic figure with horns and a physical appearance that resembled greatly to someone he defeated, Jin Kazama. Thirsty for revenge, the devil entity slowly closed the distance between them. Much to Hwoarang's dismay, that was a fight that he was not prepared for. Following the battle along the burning highway, Hwoarang found himself resting in a hospital under the watchful eye of his master. The last thing he could remember was being lifted from the ground in acceptance of his death. After hearing what had happened, he pushed the nurse away and pleaded to his master to make him stronger. After leaving the hospital, Hwoarang trained with more passion and determination than ever before. At this point, it wasn't a matter of him wanting to take down Jin. Instead, he was determined to get his revenge on his devil side. Armies and global war aside, he saw a side to Jin that not many people have ever seen. Never in his life had he been so overwhelmed, so close to death. That left a lasting impression on him. He pledged to never allow himself to be so easily defeated again, and especially not by a monster like Jin. Although the satisfaction of defeating his opponents could not equate to the satisfaction of defeating his rival, the experience was enough for him to hone his newly discovered talents. A much stronger man than before, Hwoarang longed to put his skills to the test against the only man capable of giving him a real challenge, Jin Kazama. With only a shred of reliable information at hand, he drove into a tarnished town in the Middle East. Here, he finally came eye to eye with the demonic form that made him bedridden in the past. After traveling so far, he wasn't going to leave without a fight. The furious battle ended with Jin falling unconscious. Once again, Hwoarang reclaimed his self-proclaimed title as victor in their feud, albeit with the disappointment that stemmed from the fact that Jin was not in control of his body. As he threw his last insult, a grenade was thrown near the two fighters. In a panicked attempt to save him, Hwoarang lifted his body and threw him to safety. However, the grenade managed to explode, damaging his right eye in the process. As Jin ran from the pursuing soldiers, Hwoarang drifted into unconsciousness. And that was the story of Hwoarang.